The next generation of great talk radio. The undisputed leader of the new school. Andrew Wilkow, Sirius XM Patriot. Phone lines, as always, 1-866-95-PATRIOT. The email, to spell my name right, WILKOW at WilkowMajority.com. Individual Patriot first, Conservative second, Republican third. And working every single day to make this the most popular program offered by Sirius XM Satellite Radio, because it's based on one thing and one thing only, and that is rational thought. So welcome to the Wilkow Majority. I'm Andrew Wilkow. I'm enjoying, by the way, before we get to Representative Paul Gosar from Arizona, all these left-wing progressive journalists that are all mocking the sale of the Washington Post, especially the ones that work for the Washington Post. These people are damn lucky that I didn't buy the Washington Post, because I would come to the office on the very first day after taking ownership with a printout of the tweets, and I would do a roll call and say, oh, so-and-so, mockery, 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 you're fired. So-and-so, mockery, 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 you're fired. So-and-so, mockery, 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 mockery of my buying this newspaper, you're fired too. As a matter of fact, I would fire anyone who had a problem with me acquiring the Washington Post if I acquired the Washington Post. Because if you guys were so wonderful at your job, I wouldn't have acquired the Washington Post so cheaply. So obviously, you're part of the problem, and you're all fired. Goodbye. Joining us on the program right now is Representative Paul Gosar from Arizona. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, Andrew, and listening to that, boy, I tell you what, I'd also ask him, where do you stand with the Attorney General? How do you view him? You get thumbs up, or if it's thumbs down, you got to go.
You know, what's funny is I've created a title for these people in this program. I call them Obama Dashboard Confessional Worshippers, because no matter how much Obama treats the media poorly, it's kind of like the black vote in this country. The Democrats don't need to actually do anything to get the majority of black votes, so they ignore them. It's like the media is so in love with this administration that he could wiretap each and every one of them, and they would still bow it. They would still keep a little bobblehead of him on the dashboard if they're even driving, maybe on their bikes.
Well, the memo to them is he's already doing it.
Yeah.
How do you feel? I mean, it doesn't feel good, and that's why we got to hold justice and accountability.
Okay, so what are you doing? The Congress is technically out of session right now, so what is it that you're doing with the IRS and the Tea Party?
Well, we've been engaging people, Andrew. I know a lot of people were kind of concerned that no one was having town halls, but we've actually had 4 public events just in the last day and a half. We've been out talking to people because we're not afraid of talking to people. We want to present the facts, and we want to engage people, talk about the IRS's overreach, tell them how bad that overreach is and that violation of their rights and liberties are, trying to make sure that the Tea Party gets that fever pitch about the liberties and freedoms that this Attorney General has been tearing it down and apart. And getting people energized again, because what we need to do is hold this administration accountable, and it starts with the Attorney General.
Well, let me connect some dots here. I have a piece in front of me from the American Spectator. It says IRS Union tied to FEC. It says, let's follow the breadcrumb trail. The National Treasury Employees Union represents the bureaucracy that staffs the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. The NTEU also represents, and I didn't know this, the bureaucracy that staffs the Federal Election Commission. The NTEU has a political action committee, the Treasury Employees Political Action Committee, ironically called TPAC. Right? You'd think that would be I guarantee you if the IRS actually saw TPAC on an application for tax-exempt status, they might have red flagged that, not realizing it was their own political action committee. TPAC routinely gives over 90% of its contributions to Democrats, 94 in 2012, 98 in 2010, 96 in 2008, and so on and so on. And it's amazing how somebody like Lois Lerner can use her position at the Federal Election Commission to go after the Christian Coalition, not not be run out of that bureaucracy, but actually promoted to a better job at the IRS. It seems like because of this PAC and this union connecting these two bureaucracies, you have a very powerful force of big government.
Absolutely dangerous. And when you look at her debacle with the Christian Coalition, it was overwhelmingly debunked. And you're right. What we end up doing is, for mediocrity, like people like Lois Lerner, we give them a pay grade and promotion upgrade. And now you find her at the IRS where she sees no evil, hears no evil, but didn't do anything wrong. That's the wrong attitude that we ought to be having working for the American people. The fun fact is that the boogeyman's out. That's the IRS, and she's part of the IRS debacle that is now confronting the American people, and everybody's afraid of that individual.
You know what would be an amazing, for all the talk of government oversight and reform, and we have a government oversight and reform committee, politicians of both parties promise, better management of government and stewardship of the tax dollars, waste, fraud, and abuse. You would think that there would be a bipartisan effort. I know the Democrats tried to claim that liberal groups were, as unfairly targeted. We know that's not true. The numbers do not lie. There should be a piece of legislation that says if somebody is found guilty of using their position in government in an illegal fashion, if they are operating outside the charter and the scope of their authority, that they are not only fired, they are barred from any form of federal employment for all time, and their records will be made available to state and municipal governments as well. Then they'll have to go find jobs in the private sector. I know a large portion of Republicans would be in favor of that. I just fear that Democrats wouldn't be in favor of that.
Well, it comes down to the rule of law. It should be even greater than that. Is that, Andrew, you also ought to put their benefit package on the line. You don't get to carry forward your benefit package if you've been convicted of wrongdoing against the American people. People have to be held accountable. That means unelected bureaucrats. That means bureaucrats. That means elected officials. Nobody's below the law. When you start looking at bipartisanship, tell me where Elijah Cummings is now. I thought he solved this thing with the IRS. How does he feel today when he starts looking at that IRS aspect and now the ties to the president's inner circle? This befuddles me when we try to detail the American people by changing the facts when they're convenient to us, not the real facts that actually keeps the American taxpayer, the American voter, in the know and with the proper dictation.
Here's another thing. The IRS, nothing has really changed at the IRS. Nobody has been fired. Nobody, I don't understand. It should almost come with the penalty of a dishonorable discharge from the military. If you're going to, it seems that once some of these people make their way into Washington, it is a lifetime game of musical chairs. Oh, you were a litigator over here at the Department of Energy. You overstepped your bounds. Now you're a litigator over at the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's almost all of these people are really just lawyers working at bureaucracies. These aren't people crafting, sound policy for the maintenance of good government. They're all lawyers.
Oh, it's exactly right, and I think the president told us that what he was going to do. Congress isn't going along with it, so I'm just going to intercept them and do it whatever I want to do. And I'm going to do it by executive fiat. We're going to do it to the EPA. We're going to do it to the IRS. We're going to do it through Obamacare. We're going to do it in the courts. God, you got an attorney general that has defied the U.S. Supreme Court on the Voting Rights Act, Andrew. Here's a guy that did his judge shopping, trying to find a judge to put an injunction upon a U.S. Supreme Court ruling. Can you believe that? I thought the U.S. Supreme Court was the law of the land, not the attorney general.
Here's something I'm not, every time I get a Republican member on, I'm not here to, ruin or sour your relationship with leadership or John Boehner. But it just feels like there is very little principled opposition, that much of what is talked about by the leadership in both houses is better management of bad progressive ideas. There is very little principled opposition here, meaning that we don't want to use the I word. We don't want to perp walk anyone out or make an example of anyone. It almost seems like there's too many Republicans that just want to be part of the establishment government class, just in a different brand, and there's really no constitutional principled opposition to some of the things that big government does. It's like, well, we'll just make it slightly less big. not a principled opposition to government that's out of control. It's depressing.
Oh, it is very depressing. And I was elected as one of the sophomore class, the class of 2010. That wasn't the status quo. That's when we showed that energy about defying this big government type nanny policy and getting back to individual constitutional accountability. That's what we have to stand for, and you have to start watching that sophomore class because we have rebelled and we are continuing. When you start looking at the issues of immigration, why won't Harry Reid send us the Senate bill? Because he understands it's going to get blue slipped. Because it's an unconstitutional bill that allows revenues to start in the Senate, not in the House where it belongs. But you know what? It's all about gimmickry. What he's waiting for is a germane bill that has appropriations in it that he can just slap it right on, just like Obamacare did. Isn't this the same verse, different tune, another type of language that we're doing, and another type of authorization package? This is where the American people really have to rise up. And I agree. We need to hold people in accountability. I've been in leadership because it all starts with the rule of law, Andrew. And that's why we need to have a vote of no confidence on the Attorney General.
You already did. He failed to know. He already had a no confidence vote.
No, we haven't had a no confidence vote. We have not had that on the House floor. We've had a contempt charge.
Oh, sorry, right, no contempt. Confidence. Okay, yeah. Well, contempt.
We have the administration fighting tooth and nail not to give us the information on Fast and Furious. And that's just a predicament that's unbelievable. People have died. Over 300 Mexican people lost their lives. Tell that to the Brian Terry family. They have no answers. And guns keep showing up that this administration, this Attorney General's ATF put in, and Department of Justice put in the hands of convicted international thugs. This is what we have to have, because why would we pass any rules if we're going to be susceptible by the Attorney General? Make the Democrats call into constitutional question his authority as the rule of law. That's what needs to happen. I've sat down with the Speaker. I've sat down with the Majority Leader. Some of their concerns is going to be racially motivated. Really? This is about the rule of law. This has nothing to do with race. This is calling into question what our Constitution says gives the Justice Department their rule of law and how they enforce it.
I find some of the things coming out of Republican leadership lately pretty depressing. I mean, I actually had high hopes for John Boehner when he, forced a reading of the Constitution. I really did. And again, I'm not putting you on the spot to make your life harder. I mean, Justin Amash knows what that feels like already. It just feels as if Republican, for all this talk about the fractures of the Republican Party, it's right. There are, big government Republicans who think that they can better manage, these institutions born out of big government progressivism. And then there are Republicans who are saying the problem is these big government institutions born out of progressivism. And the leadership is almost saying, shh, 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 shh. We'll figure out how to better run Obamacare.
Well, it is frustrating, and I think we deserve more. John Boehner has sat down, and I sat down with John Boehner, and I want John Boehner to utilize the values and special tools that Paul Gosar has, that Mick Mulvaney has, that Jeff Duncan has, that Trey Gowdy has, that David Schweikert has, that Trent Franks has. What we need to do is allow us to shine with our gifts and let us hide within the majority with some of our weaknesses. He's got to allow us to make the plea to the American people about the values and gifts that we as conservatives, those that hold personal accountability, personal responsibility, accountable. Because that's a winning message. That was a winning message in 2010. And yes, right now we're a blocking minority as one piece of 1/3 of the House, trying to get through a lot of things. Takes a lot of fortitude and a lot of the planets to all line up in one line. That doesn't happen very often. But you can show that you're constitutionally minded and that you're teaching the American people that we do believe in accountability. We need you to embrace it. Take this as a teaching moment, as a gravitating moment to build this United States back into the country that it once was. It's going to take some time. It can be done incrementally, but it takes a backbone.
Where are you on this assertion by Representative Trey Gowdy that some of these Benghazi survivors are being warehoused and given aliases?
We still don't know. As a member of the Oversight Committee, we do not know all of the people that were on that C-130 that came out with those 4 bodies. This administration has tried to cover that up. We need to find out. The individual who's been in Walter Reed or one of the hospitals from the military since he's left Benghazi, he is not going under the same name to keep him hidden away. We need to have these people have access to hear their stories. This administration has dug their feet. I mean, look at Fast and Furious, for example. We've seen roughly 5,000. If you take it all together, it's about 2,500 pages of 140,000 pages, Andrew. They got to talk to 130 witnesses. We got to talk to 13. You know, we need the information. We have that proper oversight of being an oversight and keeping in the checks and balances of the judicial and the executive branch. And yet we see this president and this attorney general fighting tooth and nail.
But how is he getting away with this?
You know, utilizing the courts. That's why it all comes down to the attorney general of the United States. If he is above the law, then everybody's above the law. And you have a president that's gallivanting today in Arizona, talking about what we should do here and there about housing, talking about immigration, a horrible immigration package in the Senate has pushed forward, talking about business that he has no idea about, he should be talking about the 70% of all the jobs created since January 1st that are temporary or part-time, not full-time jobs. But you know what? I'm tired of the rhetoric that he brings to my state because this state knows what they want. They want the federal government out of the way. They want the federal government to be a partner, a steward to work with them to create jobs because it's private sector that actually does jobs. It's the environment that we create that will actually personally build that personal empowerment that people want to create jobs. But this is what we have to do, is we have to incite the American people to understand it is about what they can give this country, not what this country can give them. I think that was John F. Kennedy that actually said it. Maybe with some words of wisdom we can look to the Democratic side of the aisle for.
Yeah, again, John F. Kennedy would be a Republican today by standards.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he would be. He would be a Republican. I mean, the speech he gave about tax rates in the early 1960s, I mean, you don't hear Democrats talking like that anymore. Democrats only talk about how much to increase taxes. That's it.
That's exactly right. And, I mean, they don't understand the inverse relationship, that when you raise taxes, you hurt business. When you lower taxes, when everybody's got skin in the game, you lower them and you allow people to invest the money the way they know how. They do a much better job of it with their own personal money than the federal government takes from them. So it's about time that we empower and trust the American people with their decision process because the big government project has been an utter failure.
All right, Representative Paul Gosar, Arizona District 4. Enjoy your town hall meetings. Hopefully, when it comes to the Senate, you guys can send some more conservatives.
Well, you know, one of the things we're going to do, Andrew, that I was going to put a plug in for is that we're actually going to have a congressional hearing out here in Arizona where we have at least 4, maybe 7 members of Congress coming out to talk about the IRS abuse, the EPA's overreach, and making sure that we're hearing from the people so that we bring it back to Washington, D.C., how they feel and their solutions.
All right, we'll speak to you real soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, 1-866-95-PATRIOT, 1-866-95-PATRIOT. You know, the problem isn't government redistribution. It's that the government doesn't have enough to redistribute. Got some audio.